True. Let's go to Karma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirates' lines, we break the bondage tight. Kamji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. The drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kamji verse.
What are the reasons that Garveyism or classical African nationalism falls outside of the left and the right? People call it the so-called third position. Now, it is very communalist, but it's not necessarily left. If you examine consciencism and Kwame Nkrumah, who is the creator of Afrocentrism according to Malefica Santi, or the theoretical component of Afrocentricity that values African agency in every single area of knowledge, he said that though matter is primary, it's not solitary, right? And he used these African identity transformations to fight against colonialism and imperialism. Now, if you understand Kwame Nkrumah's legacy with Marcus Garvey at Lincoln University, HBCU, you could understand that consciencism is just a Ghanaian variant of Garveyism. It is a Ghanaian variant of Garveyism. So when you're looking at these different individuals like Thomas Sankara, who affirmed that he was an African nationalist as opposed to a communist, Patrice Lumumba in the same light, and you're looking for examples of Garveyism, when you see these different African nation states seize, the means of production from the colonial powers and take control, of different sectors of society, be it the economy, be it the state machinery, be it the land and the resources. These are examples of Garveyism or classical African nationalism. What you see in ancient Kemet when it came to the unification of the two lands, Smai Tawi, and when it came to the Middle Kingdom differentiation of the Amu from black people, or the Remenkimi. Like when you're looking at the Remenkimi and their post-dynastic descendants, the Pharaonic civilization is the first state in Africa to develop state formation. And you see descendants in the different regions of Africa created according to their local environmental traditions. The Ouagadougou civilization, so-called Ghana, the Niani civilization, so-called Mali, that Galam confederacy or federation within the Wangara Inner Empire, Galam, and the Senegal River Basin, the Wallo Empire, the traditions, compiled by Euro Diao of 6 migrations from the Happy River Basin into Senegambia, the Manatondion, Diaogo migration, etc. And you see these different traditions, these African nations in the midst of the Ma'afa. These African nations in the midst of the Ma'afa, in the midst of chattelization, developing civilizations to protect their ecology and to conserve the natural environment, in opposition to invaders and in opposition to the so-called Amu. You see a lot of the Berber, the Amazigh incursions, classically these Western Africanists, they articulate the idea that the Ouagadougou or the Ghana Empire is created via syncretism from the ancient Tichit culture and the so-called Berbers. But the African theorists have a different tradition. And when you're looking at Garveyism and African nationalism, you can always see them vying for African-centered traditions, which is why it doesn't fit neatly in the left or the right paradigm, because these are Eurocentric or European Western origin paradigms, where Black people have a different trajectory, different lineage when it comes to the development of our political and social formations. We don't fall into the left or the right. We are not necessarily children of Adam Smith and children of Karl Marx as much as we are children of Marcus Garvey, Edward Blyden, Alexander Crummell, Martin Delany, right? Airy, Oran Mian, Ibrahim Njoya, and these different African polities. So when you're looking at some of the principles of Garveyism, you see that they had price controls. No person can get more than 1 million. No corporation can get more than 5 million. These are the early aughts, the 1900s. And you see these different standards. And when you're looking at Marcus Garvey's People's Political Party, most of the different standards of colonialism in terms of the anti-colonial movement and nationalizing resources, nationalizing parks, taking control of these things from the imperialists, redistributing wealth, empowering local communal social formations, giving kids houses when they get married, giving kids access to education, healthcare. You're building families, from a revolutionary perspective. This is what you see in the anti-colonial period. This is what you see, in the foreground to the creation of the Organization of African Unity, And you had the Organization of Afro-American Unity led by Malcolm X in the United States for the entire African diaspora. When you're looking at examples of the African mode of production or black nationalism, so-called third positionism, Garveyism, right? These different ideologies that a lot of these left-wing tap dancers call Hotep. Black people basically using their agency to create their own reality. The Marvel comic book fantasizes that as Wakanda. But we have the ability to actually create our own Wangara, our own inter-empire. We have the ability. So if you just look at the history of black civilizations and the history of the usage of militancy in order to, galvanize certain borders that we use pleasantries to relate across, but we organize for the creation of systems to protect the environment, systems to conserve the natural environment holistically, and use the environment as a way of bolstering our civilization. The capitalist mode of production is about destroying a factor of production, which is land and resources. It uses it as a tool to extract wealth from. But in African economies, you had what's called commodity equivalents that did not exist in a circuit, meaning that the currency, function was terminated after one sale. You would exchange cowrie shells and then you would use the shells. You would exchange, bronze coils and then you would use the coil. You wouldn't necessarily retrade that. And this is also why, in terms of divine kingship, the pharaoh or the Nisut or the Mvun or the Oba, right, or the Ezi, right, they were in charge of the wealth and resources because they were a servant of the people, and it was their job to redistribute resources to people according to what they needed or according to what the society decided. You had a common pool of resources. You didn't necessarily have individuals owning large storehouses of wealth because there wasn't necessarily a need to. And you do see within the medieval period of the Wagadu Empire the development of check systems, right? IOUs within the African mode of production. But these were not necessarily maximal across the entire society. Capitalism as a development of a technology would be about 500 years old. And I would even say currencies, the way that we use them now, would probably be about 700 to 1100 years old, according to the analysis of Africana scholars. So a lot of the social formations that we see today are very, very new. And what makes the black nationalist side important, right, the Garveyite side important, is that we are taught not necessarily to value the world or Babylon or that which is outside of us, but we are taught to value the heaven within and honor and be able to redeem our own familial and ancestral traditions. That is very, very important. And that's what makes the African mode of production, or AMP, successful and legitimate. So I'm going to be able to talk a little bit deeply on this in a future video, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Peace.
Let's go to Comma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirate lines, we break the bondage tight. Kamji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. Shift drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kamji verse.